first, please.
Thank you and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Mary Crosby, and I'm a volunteer with the Metropolitan Council on Housing. Last week at the Brooklyn hearing, I spoke about the importance of rent regulation to preserve New York City's housing stock. The intent, I believe, was a legal rent based on a fair exchange of services under a rent-stabilized apartment lease. RGB considers the maintenance costs of landlords, but not the cost to tenants who are assumed to be getting fair value. Today I want to emphasize the other side of the equation, the cost to tenants. And I don't mean the legal rent increases or the increase in household or living expenses. I ask you, where's the evidence that tenants have received fair value for their rent? In a time of vacancy decontrol, eviction bonuses, NCIs, and so on, it is now more lucrative for a landlord to drive rent-stabilized tenants out of their rent-stabilized units rather than to deliver services under a lease agreement. The vacancy allowance, the so-called eviction bonus alone, contributes more to the rise in stabilized rents than the annual RGB increase. Every rise in rent drives a regulated apartment closer to the vacancy decontrol threshold. By converting these units to market rate housing, a landlord can reap enormous profits and rob the incoming market rate tenants of a secure tenancy. The city loses because rent-stabilized housing cannot be replaced with a small amount of so-called affordable housing as part of the new luxury development. Landlords have declared war on rent-stabilized tenants, where each tenant has a target on their back as their apartment is slated for deregulation. It hits senior citizens particularly hard because half of New Yorkers over 65 live in those rent-stabilized units. Where will these seniors go if they lose their apartments? Let me ask, how many landlords does it take to change a light bulb? None, because everyone knows landlords don't do repairs anymore. How many owners does it take to change a light bulb? None, because the owners have removed the light sockets during renovation. It's no joke. It has become highly profitable for landlords to withhold services and harass tenants, bring frivolous lawsuits, subject tenants to unsafe conditions, all in order to drive rent-stabilized tenants out of their apartments. Disruptive and dangerous construction projects are initiated to force tenants to move out, and it is not just a few bad apples, it's becoming the new business model. Landlords hire consultants to help them evade penalties for violations and hire specialist tenant relocators who then pressure and strong-arm tenants to move out. These represent costs, often significant costs to tenants, costs to their health and safety, loss of services, not to mention the days off from work, calls to 311, trips to housing court, and even displacement and eviction. These tenant costs are enormous. The social costs of displacement are incalculable, despite the city's efforts to prevent harassment and evictions. The tenant family who loses their rent-stabilized apartment can't just up and move to another apartment. They will likely wind up homeless and in a shelter at enormous expense to the taxpayer. These painfully real tenant costs must be recognized.
Your time is up. Could you wrap it up, please?
In 2016, tenants certainly do not observe, in 2016, tenants certainly do not deserve a rent increase. They deserve a rent rollback, and the city needs a rent rollback. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Judith Frank.